Welcome back. Tonight, we're slowly walking into the fog of Silent Hill. This is the complete story of Silent Hill 2, told calmly so you can relax and fall asleep. Silent Hill 2 Remake, a complete story. The journey begins. James Sunderland sat in his car, staring at a letter resting on the passenger seat. The paper was worn, the handwriting familiar. It was from Mary, his wife. The letter spoke of a special place, their special place, Silent Hill. She was waiting for him there. This presented an impossible situation. Mary had been dead for 3 years. James could not explain the letter's existence, nor could he ignore it. Something drew him to that fog-shrouded town, a pull he could not resist. He parked his car at a rest stop on the outskirts of Silent Hill and began walking toward the town on foot. The autumn air was cool, the trees bare. As James descended the path into Silent Hill, thick fog rolled in, reducing visibility to mere feet. The world became muted, sounds deadened by the oppressive mist. He passed through a cemetery, the gravestones ancient and weathered. At one point, he stopped at an overlook, gazing down at the town below. Silent Hill waited, silent and still, into the town. James entered Silent Hill proper, finding the streets abandoned. Fog blanketed everything. The buildings stood empty, their windows dark. No cars moved on the roads, no people walked the sidewalks. The town felt frozen in time, as if holding its breath. He walked through the residential areas, searching. His footsteps echoed on the pavement. Occasionally, he would check doors, finding most locked. The few that opened revealed empty homes, their inhabitants long gone. Personal belongings remained photos on walls, furniture in place, but no signs of recent life. At a small memorial area near the water, James encountered a young woman standing alone. She was looking at the lake, seemingly lost in thought. As James approached, she turned. Her name was Angela Orozco. She appeared to be in her late teens or early 20s, with dark hair and troubled eyes. Angela seemed confused, disoriented. She mentioned looking for her mother and asked if James had seen her. She spoke of her mama in a way that suggested both longing and fear. James said he had not seen anyone. Angela mentioned that the town was strange, that something felt wrong. Before James could learn more, Angela walked away, disappearing into the fog. James continued through the town. He found a radio in an apartment building, and it began to emit static, harsh, grating noise that filled his ears. The static intensified as he walked, and then he saw it, a figure shambling in the fog. It was humanoid, but wrong, its movements jerky and unnatural. The creature wore what appeared to be a straitjacket of its own flesh, its body twisted and grotesque. The radio static had warned him. James defended himself, finding a plank of wood to use as a weapon. The creature was hostile, attacking on sight. After a struggle, James managed to put it down. His hands shook. This was no longer just a search for answers about a letter. Silent Hill held dangers he had not anticipated. The apartments. James made his way to an apartment complex called Woodside Apartments. The building was old, with narrow hallways and dim lighting. The wallpaper was stained and peeling. The air smelled of mold and decay. As he explored, he found more of those creatures, the ones with the twisted, straitjacketed bodies. They lurked in rooms and halls, forcing James to fight or flee. In one of the apartments, James discovered a strange gap in the wall, a hole just large enough to crawl through. He had no choice but to enter it. The passage was dark and confined, the walls pressing close. James crawled through, emerging into another section of the building. The apartments revealed fragments of other lives, belongings left behind, notes written by residents. In one unit, James found a key. In another, a puzzle that needed solving. The building seemed to shift around him, reality becoming malleable. Rooms that should not connect did. Hallways extended beyond physical possibility. Eventually, James found a way into another apartment building, Blue Creek Apartments, through a connecting passage. This building was in even worse condition. Water damage had ruined many rooms. The floors were slick. The walls had grown dark with mold. As James explored Blue Creek Apartments, the building began to change. Rust spread across surfaces like a disease. The walls became metal, stained with what looked like old blood. The lighting shifted, becoming sickly and dim. The creatures multiplied, their numbers increasing. This was not the same building he had entered. Silent Hill had transformed it into something else, something from Nightmare. The clock tower and Pyramid Head. In the transformed apartments, James encountered new horrors. Creatures hung on walls, twitching and writhing. Others crawled on the floor, their bodies incomplete. The radio's static became constant, a companion to his fear. Then James saw it, him. A figure stood in a hallway, motionless. It was massive, humanoid, wearing what appeared to be a butcher's apron. Most striking was its head, an enormous pyramidal metal helmet that covered where a head should be. The figure carried a great blade, a weapon far too large for any normal person to wield. This was Pyramid Head. James hid, watching as Pyramid Head dragged the massive blade behind it, the metal scraping against the floor with a horrible sound. The creature moved with purpose, patrolling. James waited, barely breathing, until it passed. He did not understand what Pyramid Head was or why it existed, but every instinct told him to avoid confrontation. Navigating the transformed apartments, James eventually reached a room with a clock puzzle. The solution led him to the roof access. He climbed the stairs, emerging onto the building's exterior, fire escapes and makeshift bridges. The fog was thicker here, the drop below invisible. James crossed carefully, making his way to a tower. Inside the tower, James climbed. The space was cramped, the stairs narrow. At intervals, he could see out through gaps in the walls, the fog swirling endlessly. He climbed higher and higher until he reached a room at the top. There, he found a key and evidence of someone else's presence. The room had been used recently. Before James could investigate further, a sound drew his attention, a scream, distant but clear. It was a woman's voice, meeting Maria. James descended from the tower and made his way toward the sound. He found himself in an area called Rosewater Park. The park was overgrown. The playground equipment rusted. Fog rolled across the grass in waves. Sitting on a low wall was a woman. She turned as James approached, and his heart stopped. She looked exactly like Mary, the same face, the same eyes. But this woman was different. Her hair was blonde and styled differently. She wore revealing clothing, confident and provocative. Her demeanor was flirtatious, playful, nothing like Mary's reserved nature. Her name was Maria. Maria claimed not to know James, though she found his reaction to her appearance curious. She said she worked at a club called Heaven's Night. She had heard the sirens, air raid sirens, that had sounded across the town and had been frightened. When James mentioned looking for someone named Mary, Maria offered to help. She said she knew Silent Hill well and could guide him. James was disturbed by Maria's resemblance to his wife, but accepted her company. Together, they left the park. Maria chatted as they walked, her personality vibrant and alive. She teased James gently, made jokes, behaved in ways Mary never had. The resemblance was uncanny, yet the differences were stark. They made their way through the town, heading toward a bowling alley where Maria suggested they might find information. Along the way, they encountered more creatures. Maria showed no ability to fight, staying behind James, calling out warnings when danger approached, nightmare and loss. Inside the bowling alley, James and Maria found the building empty but functional. The lanes were waxed, the pins set, as if waiting for bowlers who would never arrive. They searched the building, finding keys and items that might prove useful. Maria continued to talk, telling James about herself, asking about Mary. When James described Mary, Maria's expression shifted. She seemed hurt, as if comparing herself to Mary and finding herself wanting. Yet she maintained her cheerful facade, encouraging James to continue his search. They left the bowling alley and headed toward Brookhaven Hospital, another location where Mary might be. The hospital loomed in the fog, a large building with many wings. Its windows were dark, its entrance forbidding. James and Maria entered together. The hospital was abandoned like everything else in Silent Hill. Medical equipment remained in place, patient files sat in offices, but no doctors, no nurses, no patients could be found. The halls were long and echoing. Doors led to examination rooms, to patient wards, to operating theaters, all empty. As they explored, Maria began to feel unwell. She complained of fatigue, of not feeling right. James suggested she rest in one of the patient rooms while he continued searching. Maria agreed, lying down on a bed. James promised to return soon. James ventured deeper into the hospital. The building was a maze of corridors and locked doors. He found keys, solved puzzles involving medical records and equipment, and fought off creatures that had infested the hospital. These monsters were different from those in the apartments. Some were nurses, their bodies twisted, their faces hidden by grotesque masks. They moved with unnatural movements, tilting their heads as if listening for sounds. The hospital began to transform, much as the apartments had. The walls rusted, the floors became metal grates, blood appeared on surfaces. The other side of Silent Hill manifested, turning the hospital into a place of torture and suffering. Eventually, James made his way to an elevator that would take him deeper into the hospital. He remembered Maria waiting for him and returned to the room where he had left her. The door was locked. Through a small window, James could see Maria on the bed. Then Pyramid Head appeared in the room. Maria screamed. James tried the door desperately, but it would not open. He could only watch through the window as Pyramid Head approached Maria. The great blade rose and fell. Maria's screams cut off abruptly. Pyramid Head stood over her body for a moment, then walked away, disappearing. James stood frozen. Maria was dead. The woman who looked like Mary, who had helped him, was gone. He was alone again. Angela's pain. Grief and shock numbed James as he continued through the hospital. He had no choice but to move forward. The elevator took him down to the basement levels, areas restricted to patients. The basement was darker, the decay more advanced. Water dripped from pipes. The air was cold. In one of the basement rooms, James found Angela again. She was sitting on the floor, staring at a television that showed only static. In her hand was a knife, a large, ornate blade that seemed out of place in the hospital. Angela looked up as James entered. She seemed even more disturbed than before, her eyes distant. She spoke about her family, about her father. Her words were fragmented, hinting at terrible things. She mentioned looking for her mama, but also spoke of being afraid of having done something. James tried to comfort her, but Angela recoiled. She seemed to view all men with suspicion and fear. She stood, still holding the knife, and told James that she was looking for something she had lost. When James offered to help, Angela shook her head. She said James could not help her, that no one could. She left the knife behind as she walked away, disappearing into the hospital's dark corridors. James picked up the blade, feeling its weight. It would serve as a better weapon than what he had carried. James continued deeper, eventually finding a section of the hospital that defied logic. A long stairwell descended far beyond where the building's foundation should end. James walked down, the stairs seeming endless. The walls closed in, the temperature dropped. At the bottom, he found himself in a place that was not quite the hospital anymore. The architecture had changed, becoming older, more institutional. This area felt like a prison or an asylum from another era, Toluca Prison. James emerged from the hospital into a passage that led to Toluca Prison, a facility that stood on the edge of Silent Hill. The prison was ancient, its walls thick stone, its cells small and dark. The facility had been closed for decades, yet James found himself walking its corridors. The prison was home to new creatures, fleshy, grotesque things that had once been human. They lurked in cells and hallways, their bodies twisted by Silent Hill's influence. James fought through them, exploring the cell blocks and administrative areas. He found records and notes left behind by prisoners and guards. Some spoke of crimes committed, of sentences served. Others hinted at cruelty, at punishments that exceeded justice. The prison had been a place of suffering long before Silent Hill's fog had claimed it. In one cell block, James encountered Eddie Dombrowski, a young man he had briefly met earlier in the town. Eddie was heavyset, with a nervous demeanor. When James had first met him, Eddie had been in a room with a corpse, claiming he had nothing to do with the death, that he had just found the body. Now, in the prison, Eddie was different. He was eating food from cans, sitting among more bodies. When James questioned him, Eddie became defensive, then aggressive. He ranted about being bullied, about being mocked his entire life for his weight and appearance. He spoke of a man who had laughed at him, of a dog, a football injury that had been mentioned mockingly. Eddie's mind had broken. He saw mockery everywhere, perceived attacks where none existed. He accused James of looking at him the wrong way, of being like all the others. Before James could respond, Eddie pulled a gun and began shooting. The confrontation moved through the prison, James fleeing as Eddie pursued, firing wildly. Eventually, in a prison freezer where meat carcasses hung from hooks, James was forced to defend himself. The fight was desperate, Eddie's rage giving him strength. But James prevailed. Eddie fell, mortally wounded. In his final moments, his anger faded, replaced by confusion and sadness. He seemed to realize what he had done, what he had become. Then he died, another victim of Silent Hill's influence. James stood over the body, shaken. He had killed a man, a troubled, damaged man, but a man nonetheless. Silent Hill was not just showing James horrors, it was forcing him to become part of them. The labyrinth, beyond the prison, lay a series of tunnels and passages that formed a labyrinth beneath Silent Hill. James descended into these depths, finding himself in spaces that could not exist, corridors that twisted impossibly, rooms that connected in ways that defied geometry. The labyrinth was wet, water running down walls and pooling on floors. The sound of dripping echoed constantly. Strange symbols marked the walls, painted or carved by unknown hands. James followed the only paths available, sometimes crawling through gaps, other times climbing down shafts. In the depths of the labyrinth, James found evidence of the town's history, old structures, foundations of buildings long gone, remnants of something that had existed before the Silent Hill he knew. The town had layers, histories stacked upon histories. The creatures in the labyrinth were different still, adapted to the darkness and water. Some swam through flooded passages, others hung from ceilings, dropping down when James passed beneath. The radio static was his constant companion, warning of danger. The labyrinth tested James's resolve. The passages seemed endless, the darkness complete in places. He relied on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the black. Time lost meaning. He could have been wandering for hours or days. Eventually, James found a stairway leading up. He climbed, hoping for escape, for a return to something resembling the surface. The stairs went on and on, his legs burning with the effort. Finally, he emerged into a building. He was in a hotel, Lakeview Hotel. The Lakeview Hotel stood on the shore of Toluca Lake, a grand building from Silent Hill's past. It had been a resort, a place where families came to vacation, where couples came to celebrate anniversaries. James and Mary had stayed there once, years ago. It had been a happy time. Now, the hotel was abandoned, preserved in fog and silence. James explored the ground floor, finding a lobby with a front desk, a dining room with tables set but empty, and lounges with furniture covered in dust. The hotel retained its grandeur, but decay had begun its work. James found a stairway to the upper floors and climbed. The second and third floors held guest rooms, each numbered, each containing remnants of former guests. Some rooms were locked, others open to reveal spaces frozen in time, clothes in closets, toiletries in bathrooms, beds made and waiting. On one of the floors, James encountered Maria again. She was alive, unharmed, sitting in one of the hotel corridors. When James saw her, he could not believe it. He had watched Pyramid Head kill her in the hospital. He had seen her die, yet here she was, as if nothing had happened. Maria smiled when she saw James's shocked expression. She asked why he looked so surprised, as if they had merely been separated briefly. When James tried to explain what he had witnessed, Maria seemed confused, insisting she was fine, that nothing had happened. She had no memory of the hospital, of Pyramid Head, of her death. James did not understand, but he accepted her presence. Maria joined him again as he explored the hotel. However, something was different about her now. She seemed more fragile, occasionally coughing, complaining of not feeling well. She asked James about Mary, repeatedly, seeming fixated on the dead wife she resembled. Together, they explored more of the hotel. Maria led James to a particular room, room 312. She insisted he look inside. The room was preserved differently from the others. Personal items were arranged deliberately. The bed was made with care. This had been James and Mary's room during their stay. Maria asked James about his memories of that visit, about what he and Mary had done there. Her questions became pointed, almost accusatory. She asked if James had loved Mary, if he loved her still. James became uncomfortable, his answers evasive. Maria's demeanor shifted. The playful, flirtatious woman became cold, her words cutting. She accused James of only caring about Mary, of seeing Maria only as a replacement, a substitute. She asked what made Mary so special, why James searched for a dead woman while the living Maria stood before him. The confrontation ended with Maria storming off, leaving James alone in the room. He stood among the memories, surrounded by echoes of a past that seemed impossibly distant. The videotape. James continued exploring the hotel, now alone once more. He made his way to the upper floors, finding areas that had been management offices and storage rooms. In one room, he found a video cassette tape labeled with Mary's name. The hotel had a viewing room, a small theater where guests could watch movies. James took the tape there, finding an old television and VCR. He inserted the tape and pressed play. The footage showed the hotel room, room 312. The camera was stationary, set up on a dresser or table. The image quality was poor, the colors washed out. In the frame, Mary lay in the hospital bed that had been brought to the room. She was ill, clearly in the final stages of her disease. Her skin was pale, her body frail. James entered the frame. He approached the bed slowly. Mary did not move, her eyes closed. She appeared to be sleeping or unconscious. James stood over her for a long moment, then his hands moved to the pillow. He lifted it and pressed it down over Mary's face. Mary's body stirred, her hands rising weakly to push against James. But she had no strength. The struggle was brief. Soon, her movements ceased. James held the pillow in place for several more seconds, then removed it. Mary lay still, her eyes closed, her chest no longer rising. James stood over his wife's body, his shoulders shaking. Then he turned and walked out of frame. The video continued for a few more seconds, showing only Mary's body on the bed before the tape ended. James sat in the dark viewing room, the television screen now showing only static. The truth he had hidden from himself, that he had buried so deep that he could almost believe it was not real, had been revealed. He had not just lost Mary to disease, he had killed her. The truth of Silent Hill, the revelation, shattered the lies James had built. The letter from Mary was not real, or rather, it was not what he had thought. Mary had not called him to Silent Hill after her death. James had come because some part of him knew what he had done, knew he deserved punishment. Silent Hill had responded to that need. The town manifested people's inner guilt and pain, created worlds built from their darkest thoughts. For James, it had created a place of judgment and punishment. The creatures he fought were reflections of his own mind. Pyramid Head was his desire for punishment made manifest in Executioner, created by his own guilt. Maria was Silent Hill's creation, built from James's memories of Mary and his desires. She looked like Mary, but acted in ways Mary never had. She was the fantasy, the idealized version James had sometimes wished for during the long, painful years of Mary's illness. Silent Hill had given her to him, then taken her away, forcing James to experience loss again and again. Angela and Eddie were real people, drawn to Silent Hill by their own guilt and pain. Angela had killed her father, who had abused her. Eddie had killed a bully who had tormented him. Silent Hill drew those who felt they deserved punishment, then provided it. James left the viewing room and continued through the hotel. The building was transforming around him, the decay accelerating. The wallpaper peeled away in sheets. The floors warped and buckled. Rust spread like cancer. He found Maria one more time. She was in a room trapped behind bars that had appeared from nowhere. She called out to James, begging him to save her. But Pyramid Head appeared again? No. There were two of them now, two executioners for twice the guilt. They approached Maria as James watched. He could not reach her. The bars prevented him from intervening. Maria screamed his name as the Pyramid Heads fell upon her. This time, James forced himself to watch. He witnessed her death, accepted it, understood it. Maria was not real. She was his creation, his fantasy, and she had to die so that he could face the truth. After killing Maria, the two Pyramid Heads turned toward James. For a moment, it seemed they would attack him as well. But then, their purpose apparently fulfilled. They raised their weapons and turned them on themselves. The executioners ended their own existence, their massive bodies collapsing to the floor. Their work was done. Angela's fire. James continued deeper into the transforming hotel. The building's layout shifted constantly now, rooms appearing where none had been, hallways extending beyond physical limits. The rust consumed everything. The metal walls closing in. In one corridor, flames appeared, real fire, burning impossibly, fed by nothing, existing without consuming its fuel. The hallway was filled with heat and flame, the walls blazing. At the far end stood Angela. She was climbing a stairway that led up into the fire, ascending toward the flames. James called out to her, but she stopped, turning to face him. Her expression was tired, resigned. Angela spoke about her life, about the abuse she had suffered at her father's hands, about her escape and her crime. She said she had been in hell her entire life, that the flames were all she had ever known. To her, the world was always burning. This was simply how things were. James tried to offer comfort, tried to suggest that Angela could still find a different path. But Angela shook her head. She looked at James with something like pity, as if he was the one who did not understand. She said goodbye, then continued climbing the stairs into the fire. James watched her go, the flames consuming her form. He could not follow. The fire was not his, it was Angela's. Born from her pain, he could only witness her final choice and honor it, the rooftop. James ascended through the hotel, climbing ever higher. The building seemed to grow as he climbed, adding floors that should not exist. The spaces became more abstract, less like a real hotel, and more like a representation of one, a memory of structure without substance. Eventually, James reached a rooftop area. The fog was thick here, the edges of the roof disappearing into white nothing. In the center of the roof, something waited. It was a creature, grotesque and wrong. It lay on a metal frame, bound or perhaps fused to it. The body was feminine but distorted, the flesh diseased and rotting. As James approached, the creature stirred, becoming aware of his presence. This was Mary, or rather, what remained of her in James's mind. This was his memory of her final days, when disease had ravaged her body, when she had become unrecognizable, when James had looked at his wife and seen only her illness. The creature attacked, its movements weak but persistent. James fought back, hating every moment, revolted by what he had to do. He struck at the diseased body, each blow an act of violence against his wife's memory. The fight was desperate and horrible. The creature endured terrible damage, continuing to move, continuing to attack. James felt tears on his face as he fought, crying for Mary, for what she had become, for what he had done. Finally, the creature stopped moving. The body on the frame went still. The fight ended. James stood over the remains, his weapon falling from his hands. The fog swirled around him. From somewhere in the mist, he heard a voice, Mary's voice, clear and strong, as she had been before the illness. She was speaking to him, Mary's letter. Mary's voice filled the air, reading a letter, the real letter, the one she had actually written. It had not been a summons to Silent Hill. It had been a final message to her husband, written in her last days. In the letter, Mary spoke of her love for James. She thanked him for their years together, for the happiness they had shared. She spoke of their visit to Silent Hill, to this very hotel, and how those memories would always be precious to her. But she also spoke of anger and pain. She wrote about the long months of her illness, the suffering she had endured, the indignity of her decline. She admitted that she had sometimes been cruel to James, lashing out in her pain, saying things she did not mean. She had seen how the illness had affected him too, how watching her suffer had wounded him deeply. Mary wrote that she wanted James to be happy. After she was gone, she wanted him to move forward, to live his life, to find peace. She did not want him to drown in grief and guilt. She wanted him to remember the good times and let the bad ones fade. The letter ended with a simple farewell. Mary said goodbye to James, releasing him, telling him to go on without her. She signed it with love. As the letter concluded, the fog began to lift. The rooftop environment started to dissolve, the illusion breaking. James found himself somewhere else, a place that was both nowhere and everywhere, a space between. Before him stood Mary herself, or a manifestation of her. She was, as she had been before the illness, healthy and whole. She looked at James with understanding. James fell to his knees. Words poured out, apologies, confessions, desperate attempts to explain. He told Mary about the long months of caring for her, about watching her suffer, about his own growing resentment and exhaustion. He admitted that he had sometimes wished it would end, that the burden would lift. He confessed that when the moment came, when he had pressed the pillow down, part of him had felt relief. He wept for his weakness, for his selfishness, for his crime. He said he deserved whatever punishment awaited him, that he had come to Silent Hill seeking it. He could not live with what he had done. Mary listened to it all. When James's words finally ran out, when he had nothing left to say, she spoke. She told him she understood. She had known, even then, what was happening. In her suffering, she had sometimes wished for the same end. She was angry with him, yes, but she also understood the impossible situation, the terrible choice, the human weakness that led to that moment. Mary told James that he had to forgive himself. The guilt and pain he carried would not bring her back, would not undo what was done. He could choose to let it destroy him, or he could choose to live to carry her memory with him and honor it by continuing on. She offered him forgiveness, though she acknowledged he might never forgive himself. She told him it was time to let go, to leave Silent Hill, to return to the world. She would always be part of him, but he was still alive, and life was a gift that should not be wasted. Leaving Silent Hill. The manifestation of Mary faded, dissolving into the fog. The space around James dissolved with her. He found himself back in reality, or something close to it, standing near the lake's edge, the fog beginning to thin. The town of Silent Hill lay behind him, still shrouded in mist. James turned away from it, walking toward where he had left his car so long ago. The journey out was quiet, the fog gradually lifting, revealing the trees and road. James carried Mary's letter with him, the real one, the one she had actually written. He would keep it, treasure it, let it guide him forward. The pain would not vanish, he knew that. The guilt would remain a scar that would never fully heal, but he could choose to live with it rather than die from it. As James walked, memories came not just of Mary's illness and death, but of the good years before that. Their first meeting, their courtship, their wedding, lazy Sundays and inside jokes. The way Mary smiled when she laughed. Their trip to Silent Hill, to the hotel, when they had been happy and whole. Those memories were real too. They deserved to be remembered, to be honored. Mary had been more than her illness, more than how she died. She had been a person, his person, and that meant something. James reached his car as dawn began to break. The sun rose over the mountains, burning away the last of the fog. Silent Hill remained behind him, still hidden, still waiting for the next person drawn to its streets. James got in his car. He sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, looking back one last time. Then, he started the engine and drove away, leaving Silent Hill behind. He drove toward the sunrise, toward whatever future awaited him, carrying his memories and his grief, but also carrying the possibility of peace. The road stretched ahead. James followed it, moving forward, choosing life. Behind him, Silent Hill faded into the distance, returning to silence, waiting. The town would always be there for those who needed it, for those whose guilt called them. But James was leaving. His time in Silent Hill had ended. He had faced his truth. He had been judged. He had been given a choice, and he chose to continue to honor Mary's final wish, to live the life she had wanted him to live. It would not be easy. Some days would be harder than others. But he would try. The car drove on, carrying James away from the fog and the monsters, away from the manifestations of his guilt, away from Silent Hill. The sun continued to rise, bringing light to the world. A new day had begun. James Sunderland drove into that new day, forever changed, forever marked by what had happened, but still alive, still moving forward. Silent Hill receded in his rearview mirror, growing smaller and smaller, until finally it disappeared completely, swallowed by distance and the curvature of the earth. The journey was over. A different journey was beginning. James drove on. The story of Silent Hill 2 is a tale of guilt, grief, and the possibility of redemption. It explores the darkest aspects of human nature, the capacity for violence, the weight of unbearable choices, the pain of loss, while also suggesting that even those who have committed terrible acts might find a path forward. The town of Silent Hill serves as both judge and mirror, reflecting back to each visitor their own inner demons made manifest. For James Sunderland, Silent Hill was the place where he finally confronted the truth he had hidden from himself, faced the consequences of his actions, and was given the choice to either be destroyed by his guilt or to accept forgiveness and continue living. The fog that shrouded the town was like the fog of denial in James's mind, and when both lifted, he could finally see clearly and choose his path forward. You've reached the end of Silent Hill. James's journey is over now, but the town never truly lets go. If this story helped you relax, or if you're already drifting into sleep, you can let the video continue in the background. Feel free to like the video or subscribe for more calm game stories made for sleep. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me. Rest well, and I'll see you in the next story.